Okay, so I got through the first 20 pages of this 175-page closed hearing for the Idaho 4 Brian Koberger pre-trial thing back in January. So these are my notes. They started off with asking like who is going to be testifying, and it said that there's going to be consultants and witnesses testifying. They clarified a Miss Allen is from the Attorney General's office, and a Miss Workman is the victim witness coordinator. Then the judge clarified that this was going to be regarding the Franks hearing and suppression of IGG. Anne had only had her copy of like 1,000+ pages of the exhibits that they were going to go over with the witnesses, and the judge was not happy about that. He said, "You got to make sure you have other copies so that I can follow along with you," which makes sense. He has the digital versions, but as we all know, a lot of people are very inept when it comes to technology, so, and plus you just want to be able to follow along. The first witness was, in fact, Brett Payne. Now, who is Brett Payne? If you haven't been following this case, Brett Payne is the first witness for the defense in this particular hearing. He is the detective corporal of Moscow PD. He's been there for 7 years. Previously to that, he was a military police corps for the U.S. Army for 3 years. He became the lead detective in this case, but after the first 24 hours. I didn't know that. I thought he was it from the very get-go. It made me question who was the lead detective for the first 24 hours. Was there one? Like, who was in charge? She asked him, she being Anne, the defense attorney, said that was he responsible for the case and the evidence, and he said yes, confirmed that. It was the first time that he heard Brian Koberger's name on December 19, 2022. He said yes, he confirmed that. And she asked how was that done, and he said it was as a result of the IGG, or investigative genetic genealogy, i.e. the family tree for the DNA, done by FBI. It was a phone call, and they were told Brian Koberger's name. Before that, he was not a suspect. And you kind of wonder why. She went on to ask him, before December 19th, was the FBI cast co-located with you? Cast is the cellular analysis survey team. They're the ones analyzing the cell phone, or just phone data in general. And he said yes. Several weeks of being co-located is what he confirmed. And then she confirmed that, or clarified that it was Nicholas Balance. He's the FBI cast team member. She asked about footage, that they had gone over footage, and he clarified, Payne clarified, saying 112 King Road camera, Linda Lane camera, A&W or Lauder / South Main or Highway 95 is where it's located. He said the Indian Hills camera, a Ridge Road camera, and referred to them as such. So like that's how they referred to the footage, is by their street or where they were found. She asked about interviews being done before the December 19th of 2022. And then she kind of just dropped it. She said, did you interview the roommates of 1122 King? But she didn't seem to elaborate on it at that time, so I'm wondering if she's going to come back to that and circle back to it. But she did ask that. Then they moved into him saying it's a collaborative effort to go the IGG route, because she asked, what made you guys want to go that route? He said it was a collaborative effort, or collaborative decision to do that. And then they started talking about Othram Labs began the process of the identification, but that he doesn't remember what Othram Labs provided to them, being law enforcement. Idaho State Police and Othram Labs this is what he said, ISP and Othram Labs exhausted their resources, and they moved it to the FBI as a collective decision, that it being the DNA IGG investigation. They said more databases were able to compare the sample to, and then she started asking him, do you know the rules that apply to those databases? He said no, so she dropped it, and she said she probably asked someone else those questions. Communications with FBI about IGG. He said that they were done via the telephone. And then he gave this long spiel about there was very few communications, if any at all, and it just seemed to be over-explaining things. Like, Have you ever had someone like lie to you and they just go into massive detail and you're like, why are you telling me all this? But it's because they're lying, right? They're trying to cover their tracks. And if you want to check it out, it's on page 14 of this document, the one that's 175 pages long. It's it's the closed hearing transcript. She tried to ask him what files/docs went to the FBI from Othram Labs. He says, I don't remember. Did they receive docs from after Brian Kohberger's name? He said they did receive docs after Brian Kohberger's name received, but doesn't remember what they were. And he said they were thousands of pages received, but no specific number in his head of how many they received. And it's like, this guy has no criminal history, and he confirms that later. So how do you have thousands of pages on him? On page 15, it says, once they have Brian Kohberger's name, they conveyed it to the FBI conveyed it, and they said it was only supposed to be taken no more than a tip. That's it. Which I found really interesting. Like, why are they limiting it and subjecting it to only being a tip? But when answering, do you know why the FBI connected Brian Kohberger to the case? He did say, if memory serves, 2 times, as if like when you're reading it, it sounds like he's trying to potentially lie, or just, it's like he's trying to, I don't know how to explain it. If you read it, it's on page, I think it's around 15. December 20th, they had a second meeting with the FBI via Microsoft Teams. I was like, you guys can't travel to see each other when it's a quadruple homicide. I think it's a little more important than a Teams meeting, but okay. Walked through the family tree and how they did that. So the FBI walked through the Moscow PD of how they did what they did. He said it was over my head, an extensive conversation that he doesn't remember everything of, but it shouldn't be. But my point is, it shouldn't be over his head. He's the lead detective, and if he has to ask inquisitive questions to understand the material, he should. Anne asked, why did you become interested in learning about Brian Kohberger and his identity? Payne brings up the knife sheath on his own and the DNA, saying that this was a strong piece of evidence, but they were interested in anyone to do with the case. Anne asked him, is it your understanding that the FBI's work said it was Brian Kohberger's DNA on the sheath? He said no, and that it was possible DNA, and that they should look into it, but nothing stated that Brian Kohberger's DNA is on the knife sheath. December 20th, he said, on the day after they learned his name, they started looking at the following: DMV searches, NCIC offline returns, NCIC searches, I'm not sure what NCIC stands for, TLO database, which is a credit-based search, and that they found, and she asked him, but you found that there was no criminal history for Brian Kohberger, and he confirmed that there wasn't. She started asking him about the Pennsylvania trash pull at his parents' home, and he said he wasn't there, and then so she just kind of moved on because obviously he wouldn't have much information for that. She said, in addition to everything you just talked about doing, you did look at the evidence at the 1122 King home, right? And then she segued into the unknown male B, as in boy, DNA. And what efforts did they do to pursue that individual? And he didn't remember where it came from. So she said, the blood spot on a handrail between the second and the first floor. Why did you not pursue that person? They already received Brian Kohberger's name, and entering another DNA profile into CODIS would remove the previous one from the knife sheath, and they decided to hold off and address at a later time. So they were aware of this unknown male B before Brian Kohberger's name and did nothing about it. She also went on to say about unknown male D, which was the blood sample on the gloves outside the home, and this proves that he's lying. They should be able to replicate what they do with testing, and that they knew before the unknown male B and unknown male D, but he uses it as an excuse as to why they didn't test for Brian Kohberger. Like, they didn't remove Brian Kohberger and test the other two, but they knew about the other two before Brian Kohberger. So this man just lied on the stand. So that's the first 20 pages. I will bring you the rest. Make sure you follow, like for more. I really appreciate all of you, and we're getting into it. This is the closed hearing transcript for the Brian Kohberger Idaho 4 murders case.